Is imagination simply contained in the mind? Or does it tap into an unseen world with messages waiting to be told? There is a place where legends cross over into our world, where strange visions and whispers beckon, and superstition takes hold. Step into the Black Cat's shadow.
Camp Blood, ain't you?
God damn it, Ralph, get out of here. Go on, get. Leave people alone.
You'll never come back again.
Oh, shut up, Ralph.
It's got a death curse.
He's a real prophet of doom, ain't he?
I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. His body was never recovered from the lake after he drowned. And if you listen to the old-timers in town, they'll tell you he's still out there. Some sort of demented creature. Surviving in the wilderness. Full-grown by now. Stalking. Stealing what he needs. Living off wild animals and vegetation. Some folks claim they've even seen him. Right in this area. The girl who survived that night at Camp Blood, that Friday the 13th. She claims she saw him. She disappeared 2 months later. Vanished.
Welcome back to the Black Cat Shadow. I'm your host, Andy, podcasting from Kansas City, Missouri.
And I'm Dakota. I'm coming at you from the crazy town of Osawatomie, Kansas.
And I'm Phantom Dark Dave, coming at you from the heart of Texas.
And so we want to thank you guys for joining us on this episode. It's going to be a fun chat, we think. And we have a special guest with us. And he is Tyler, and he's from the Horror Podclass. Hey, Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, Andy, thanks for having me. We're excited to be here and contribute as best we can to the kind of academic bent on the Friday the 13th series.
Yeah, man. We're excited to have you guys on. And if you guys don't know, they are another podcast here in Kansas City, and they're a horror movie podcast. And Tyler, you mentioned the academic, perspective. Kind of share what you guys do on your show.
Sure. So Mike and I, my other co-host, we've been into horror movies for a long, long time, and we both went to college together. And he got out and kind of did a separate thing and got into teaching. And I decided to be a teacher, and I pull in genre fiction in any way that I can. So we use a lot of horror. I teach high school, and Mike's taught high school as well. And every summer I go back to my alma mater, Truman State, and I teach a class all on the zombie genre. So we look at movies, and we look at disaster preparedness and a lot of different fiction in that genre. So the podcast kind of grew out of that we love to talk about, horror movies with the understanding that oftentimes they're a little more than just, killing people, that they have lots to say, and we should, talk about it more.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you said that because, I think horror gets a bad rap. It's like a lot of times people will just see them as like popcorn movies or, and something with little to no substance. But I feel like, especially with like, a lot of the modern horror that we're seeing now, they have something to say. And so it's really cool that you guys kind of take it to that next level. And you're definitely going to bring the IQ up here on our show. So
no, I doubt it. We mostly just like to hear each other talk. So, it's nothing more complex than that, but it's a lot of fun. So we appreciate you giving us a shout out and having me on, man.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, so if you guys don't know it, this is a show all about the Friday the 13th movie series. We're going to do what you may call a franchise overview. Not necessarily like doing like an in-depth review of each movie, but we're definitely going to talk about the series. We'll talk about, probably some more than others. We're going to talk about some of our favorites, some of our least favorites. We're going to talk about some of our first experiences, like how we got into the Friday the 13th series. And, so it's just going to be a fun conversation. So just, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, guys. And, to start off with, I wanted to kind of hear how everybody first, got their feet wet with the Friday the 13th series. Like, for me, I'll start off, like, the first movie that I saw was Friday the 13th Part 3. I know that one kind of has the added 3D effect to it. So I think that one kind of like people kind of get bogged down, or people don't like it maybe because of the 3D aspect of it. And when I first watched it, I didn't really, I don't know. I was like a kid, so I don't know if I realized that it was supposed to be in 3D. But I saw it on this UHF station here in Kansas City. It was Channel 62. They used to have this thing called Day Scream Theater. I don't know if you remember that, Tyler, or not.
Yeah.
They would show like horror movies on Saturday afternoon, and that is where I saw a lot of my horror first, was on that UHF show.
Yeah, and I think it was on like in the afternoon, so like I could always sneak downstairs or whatever and like catch a movie because my parents like didn't know, they're like, it's the middle of the afternoon on Sunday, he's not going to watch anything. And that's where you could get, especially like the kind of B-rated stuff. So, I love to catch that when I could. Sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, my first was Friday the 13th Part 3. And it really introduced you to the, like in that one, you had, it was kind of a mixed bag. You had a lot of different elements in it. You had the biker gang that the campers had to contend with along with Jason. And then you had like it introduced me to like just the nature of Jason. He kind of improvised with his kills, and he did a lot of lurking in the background and stuff. I thought that was really cool. I don't know, Dakota, what was your first Friday the 13th movie?
You guys are going to laugh your ass off. Let me tell you this one. It was Jason X.
Okay.
No way.
Yeah, it was Jason X. I'm from that generation. Like, I was born in the 90s, but like the first time I watched it, it would have been probably like 2005, 2006. Came on an HBO, which is really funny that you would see a Friday the 13th movie on HBO. Very rare. I mean, anymore now we're seeing the more modern stuff. But so I watched it and I was like, "What the hell did I just watch?" So I was a little confused. So then I started doing a little bit more research, and I actually looked into more of the other movies. So that was my first introduction to it, and I'm a sci-fi type guy, so I kind of like the little sci-fi aspect. Especially my favorite kill is when he freezes the girl's face, smashes it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, Tyler, what was your first Friday the 13th movie?
Oh, I was trying to think. I think honestly, it was probably Part 2. So I have a sister that's 8 years older than I am, and that's where I first fell in love with horror movies. She would drag me to all of them because she loved them too. And so we would always have to concoct an excuse to let her parents know that I was watching something family friendly or whatever. So I got dragged to Nightmare on Elm Street. I got dragged. My first horror movie was The Believers way back in the day. But I think we saw Part 2 maybe even in the theater. It depends on what year that came out. I don't remember, but I remember not understanding everything fully. Like I was like, okay, I know I've missed the original, so I don't really get what's going on. I think Mrs. Voorhees' head, I think, is in the fridge to start that off, and I was like completely clueless, but also like super entertained and super freaked out. So I mean, like all of those movies I saw, it was just more of this like incredible stuff that I wasn't supposed to be seeing, which immediately, hooked me to the genre in general. So. Oh
yeah, definitely that opening scene to Part 2 was great. I really liked that. Dave, what was your first Friday the 13th?
I started with the original, actually. So spoiler, I already knew what was happening. But no, it's one of those things where my aunt had owned the tape, and so I remember checking out the cover, and you flip over the VHS cover on the back. It's got the kid who's being dragged out of the water like he was drowning or something, and all the lifeguards are going to save him. And then it shows a little bit of the bow and arrow sequence. I'm like, oh man, this looks like a good flick. Like Friday the 13th, and okay, I'll check it out. And I remember watching it and really thinking it's a lot of creative death sequences in this movie, not knowing anything about Tom Savini at the time, but really digging it. And then after that, going to a Sam Goody. I don't know if y'all remember Sam Goody, and buying Friday the 13th Part 2. And then actually from then on, I watched them chronologically.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that first movie was definitely innovative, especially in the special effects arena. You got the great Tom Savini doing special effects, and it just had some really standout special effects, like the Kevin Bacon kill. Everybody talks about that. Even, when we talked to Victor Miller, he said that was his favorite kill of the movie. But also another thing that stood out from it was the identity of the killer. I mean, did you guys, I don't know, Dave, when you were watching it, were you aware of Jason Voorhees when you watched that first one, since it was the first one you saw?
Not really, man, because I didn't really read, the synopsis or anything. There was no IMDb, so if you didn't already know, or you didn't have somebody who told you, you were pretty much at the mercy of the video. So when watching Friday the 13th, it was like a good old slasher flick. And at that time, that was probably one of the first one. I'd already seen Halloween by then, so I knew I liked the genre. But it was, it's a lot more graphic than the original Halloween was. So to me, it was introducing a lot more, the effects, which I know Dakota's a big fan of too, a lot of the practical effects. But so I had no idea who the killer was. And I remember at the end going, awesome. And then seeing the second one, and I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I know we're going to get into it, and I won't dive too deep into it, but I will say, I know as logically, it makes no sense whatsoever, but it doesn't bother me one bit that the son comes in and takes over for the series. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, Dakota, when you saw Friday the 13th, the original movie, I mean, obviously you've heard of Jason Voorhees at that point. Did you expect Jason Voorhees to be the killer in that first movie?
To be honest, when I started doing research, I got a little bit of a spoiler from it. So when I went back and actually watched them, it was like, this is actually really great storytelling, and I can understand why people would have assumed when they first watched it that, oh wow, the son is actually the one doing all the killings. But, obviously when it comes around to the, it's probably 30 minutes towards the end of the movie where you find out it was Pamela.
Yeah, it's like probably the last 30 minutes of the movie, yeah.
So yeah, it makes for a really great resolution for the whole film. And then like you were talking about going into the other movies, like David mentioned that you start seeing Jason take up the murders. It was one of those things that's to kind of, I'm trying to find the right words for it. It kind of twists you a little bit. It gets you kind of twisted around. It's like, wait, how the hell is this still happening? So.
Yeah, the whole mythology behind it is a little screwy, but that's okay. Yeah, I'll give him leeway. Tyler, when you saw the original Friday the 13th, I mean, did you know who the killer was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably because I saw them out of order.
Yeah.
I had an idea, but what I think was really interesting, right? You had the screenplay writer on last week, and I thought it was really fascinating to listen to him talk about how they had to hide that reveal through most of the movie. Like he's like, we only had her for like a few days or whatever, so when we actually shot it, it was like this really small amount of time. So it's just genius how you go through that entire movie with one general idea, because the situation forced them to film the movie like that, which is awesome, right? And it leads to some really cool, really cool movie making and storytelling in the end. So, and like the rest of the guys said, I mean, yeah, you change the mythos as the movie goes along, but then the movie turns into a monster in a mask like trope, and that stuff is really interesting. And I think to watch, because Jason is essentially a bullied kid, right? And she alludes to the fact that he might be special needs, and all of that stuff, I think, makes for him to be a really compelling revenge figure throughout the film. So as the movies go on, watching his arc is as interesting as watching the film itself, I think.
So among like the iconic franchises of horror, you know, you got Halloween, you have Nightmare on Elm Street, among others. Like, where does Friday the 13th stand? Is it like, do you have another franchise that's your favorite, or is Friday the 13th your favorite? Tyler, I'll let you start off with this one.
I think that I like all of those franchises in different ways. But if I were to evaluate all of like the movie monsters, I think Jason's probably one of the best, if not the best, because like Freddy Krueger, like at his core is like a child molester, and like you can't ever like root for that, you know, like
Right.
there's other than his sense of humor, there's not a lot that's redeemable, you know? So, and Michael Myers, I think, is built to be an enigma. He's built to kind of be devoid of emotion. So when you throw in all of the backstory of the first film, like Friday the 13th is and Jason Voorhees is super compelling. So like there are moments, particularly in my favorite movie, where you almost root for him, you know, and that is such a weird feeling, particularly in like the 80s slasher film, to be like, oh, you know, like to have a little bit of those heartstrings pulling for like the mass murderer. But in this way, you know, like I don't know. I think he's certainly, of all the characters, he's the most redeemable. And like in Freddy versus Jason, like he's bullied again, you know, like he's picked on again by Freddy Krueger. So man, I teach high school as my day job. He seems like that kid that might be getting picked on. So I kind of like him the best.
All right. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, if we're going to play decades, you know, with all the big franchise films that came out around that same time, if we're going to dial to like one or two movies, it's Halloween for me. But if we're going to go with overall series, I mean, it does help that Friday the 13th had so many films. So even when they got one wrong, there was another one to redeem it. But I would say for me, Friday the 13th, top three.
And Dakota, where does Friday the 13th stand in your horror ranking?
Okay, so as far as like the slasher films go, you know me, I'm not a slasher film type guy.
Yeah.
But I will say that as a genre, well, not as a genre, as a franchise, I mean, I think that is my number two. My number one franchise would be Nightmare on Elm Street, just because I love Freddy Krueger. I like his kind of unique play on being a killer and being a supernatural killer of all things, and being in his own, having his own realm for his killings is what makes that more interesting for me. Again, though, Friday the 13th comes up at number two.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like, for me, it's between Friday the 13th and Halloween, because I love the first two Halloweens. Are like probably my favorite horror movies of all time. But when you like compare like the two series as wholes, like there's probably more solid Friday the 13th movies than there's solid Halloween movies. I don't know. I mean, but I will watch any movie in either series any day of the week. I would love, I love both series, but I think just like, technically speaking, I think Friday the 13th is probably better series. I don't know though. It's hard. I think just because of the sheer amount of movies in the Friday the 13th series kind of outweighs how many are in the Halloween series. But then you have like the weight of John Carpenter's Halloween, and so it's hard to compete with that, really. So I'm kind of torn, I guess, in my decision. What do you guys think about? There's one character that was in the first two Friday the 13th movies that I really enjoyed, and I wish they would have. I don't know how they could have carried it on, but Crazy Ralph. He's just this crazy loony like guy that would always, and he's actually, his character, his the type of character has since become like a common trope in slasher movies. You got this crazy guy that's always warning the teenagers, don't go in the woods or don't go to the lake or, whatever. And so, Crazy Ralph, I think he pretty much started that. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just love that character. Tyler, what do you think about Crazy Ralph?
Yeah, no, Crazy Ralph's awesome, right? And you see Crazy Ralph is actually a literary device that's used like in all kinds of stuff. So he's Cassandra. So Cassandra is a character way back, in Greek mythology that everyone called crazy because she was warning of, impending doom. And we have, used her and crafted her into this great storytelling device to like give us a little bit of foreshadowing, but also kind of dismiss what they're foreshadowing because everybody thinks they're crazy, So like it's super important, and it also adds like a level of Schadenfreude at the end because everybody knew what was going on. If you would have just listened to Crazy Ralph, then you could have avoided everything that happened. So yeah, dude, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, so for our listeners out there, Dakota had to drop off. He has technical issues there, so
he was killed by Jason. Throughout this podcast, we're going to be picked off one by one.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, Dave, what do you think about old Crazy Ralph? Is he one of your characters you like in the Friday the 13th series?
Yeah, man, he's a likable character. I definitely, I wouldn't put him as one of my favorite characters in the franchise, but by no means do I dislike him. I think he is important to the film. Like Tyler was saying, he brings that sense of danger. He tells him, "You're doomed." The whole time, we're all doomed. And spoiler, even has a cool death scene of his own. So, and I think it's really cool when they tend to revisit characters like him later in the franchise as well. It almost feels like an ode to him because they realized, oh man, we should have kept him around.
Oh yeah, I think in part 3 they had some old guy that was like sleeping in the road, and the teenagers almost hit him with their van, and he gets up and he has like what looks like an eyeball or something. I don't know, and he's like warning them, to stay away from the camp or whatever. Everybody's got their favorite final girl at Friday the 13th. Dave, who's your favorite final girl?
We talking about in general or just this franchise?
Just in Friday the 13th, yeah.
Just Friday the 13th. Oh, it's Amy Steele. All the way.
I can dig that. What about you, Tyler?
I don't know. Are we count? Does it have to be girl, or could we count like?
No. I guess it's the final survivor. Yeah.
Tommy? Like a young Corey Feldman.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how great that movie is, but like to this day, when he shaves his head and he's like, and there's that scene is disarmingly scary. It's just strange, right? And it's partially the way he looks, but like the interaction. And I fundamentally believe there's like there's great like emotion in that scene where you feel for everybody. So I guess Tommy in that particular scene would be mine if we can include 10-year-old kids or whatever.
I would say the way they pulled the emotion out of him, the way he's hacking away out of fear. You said it looks like there's some serious. Maybe they put like a picture of Michael Jackson on the floor, and he's just like,
"Oh no,
die!"
Yeah, terrible, but yeah, true, right?
Oh yeah.
Can I go back on my answer? If we weren't doing Friday the 13th, favorite final girl, Mark Patton.
Okay.
Screams better than anybody in this franchise.
Oh yeah. Yeah, now I put you guys on the spot. Now I'm going to have to think of what my answer is for that. I liked Adrienne King a lot.
You're not that stalker, are you?
No, she's a little old for me. I think, let's see, how old was I whenever the first Friday? That's okay, we won't talk about age, but...
I know how old you were.
But, talk about robbing the cradle, but, no, it's interesting. Yeah, I think... Yeah, I like Alice just because maybe she was the first one. But you got to appreciate, like you said, Dave, you got to appreciate Amy Steele, like what her character did. She had smarts, Amy Smart, But, wait, was her name Amy Smart or Amy Steele?
Amy Steele.
Still, never
mind.
But
it's still cool that you said that.
Yeah.
I'll probably edit that
Amy
out.
Smart's pretty cool, too. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, is that a person? It seems like that's...
Yeah. Road
that?
Trip, the blonde.
Oh, okay.
Hot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Varsity Blues, the brunette.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking
Crank. We keep going.
But no, like Amy Steele, she
turned us down, by the way. I tried to get Amy Smart on the show.
Wait, Amy Smart or Amy Steele?
Amy Smart. Like, we're a horror podcast. You want to come on? And I'm like, it's worth a try.
Hey,
Yeah, why not?
But yeah, Amy Steele, she had brains. She used the whole child psychology, at the end there in that final confrontation with Jason, she, you know, acted like, you know, his mother, and it actually worked there for a little while. And man, could you imagine putting on that sweater though? That would be pretty gross. But yeah, I don't know. Do you guys, either one of you guys, have like certain tropes of the franchise that stand out to you that you like a lot?
I think Friday the 13th as like a franchise is like even more so than I think Halloween, because I like there's particularly in the later Halloween movies, there's a lot of like mythos that surrounds Michael Myers, and you don't ever really get that in Friday the 13th. So it feels like one of the last, or probably the first, I should say, like pure kind of slasher franchise. And I've just been thinking about slasher franchises in general lately, because we got this advanced copy of a book called Sleeping with the Lights On, the unsettling story of horror by Darryl Jones, who's like a professor out of Oxford. And he talks about like slasher films in particular, and he even brought Saw into it to kind of like have a modern day representation. The power of those movies was that they became like ritual, that we would like go to the movies or watch them at home and we would know exactly what would happen. You know, like it was this kind of same setup, and we came to know what to expect, but we watched it with our friends or, you know, our significant other or whatever. And there was some power in knowing what would take place and still being scared and still going through that process, that like a slasher movie to me is probably not my favorite genre, but I think it's really cool because of that kind of shared ritual experience that you have with an audience, and the fact that it, you know, I mean, it had legs, you know, that there were so many movies that got made in that franchise. I think it speaks to the power of that kind of collective ritual of horror movies. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. What about you, Dave? Any of the tropes of Friday the 13th that you like especially?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. One, I know we keep talking about Halloween. We keep talking about the comparisons between, but you know, with them being two of the big dogs in the slasher franchise, I really love the POV, you know, just seeing the killer's point of view. It works with Halloween because you see the shape and then you see the POV, where in Friday the 13th, you really don't see the killer until the end. So you're mostly watching, you know, the POV and then just a limb here and there. But then once you discover Jason in it, they switch in between, just like they do in the original Halloween, how it's POV. You know, you see Jason looking through the trees. And then all of a sudden you switch and you see Jason kind of in the art of the kill, so to speak. And I love the way that they do that, because I feel like they've completely got away from that now. So an example would be if you think of Scream, that's a slasher, like a modern day slasher. There's no POV really in that. You see the killer all the time. The killer's masked, you know, so maybe it's a little different because, you know, in Friday the 13th, you're like, oh, look, it's Pamela. We can see her. Or, oh, Jason again, guy in a hockey mask. Yep, not doing it. Or in Scream, you know, it could have been anybody in a costume. So, like, we can just show the figure. We'll make all of our characters kind of look the same so no one knows who it is. But the other trope is the obvious cabin in the woods horror. I mean, this was the one that you might have had one or two one-offs that didn't have a whole franchise together. But this one's set in the woods, and for 7 consecutive films before ever going to Manhattan, you know, you got the whole camping is cool and camping is deadly, and that's something that I still to this day wish they did more of.
Yeah, man, and I think you know, they paid homage to that entire setup in the movie Cabin in the Woods. You know, like there are so many things. If you keep Friday the 13th in the back of your mind, like that, it really is a critique of that film series. I understand there's a lot more to it than that, but using that as a guide, oh, dude, it's so cool. And you know, you can make a ton of those connections. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen Cabin in the Woods. I'm going to watch that with that in mind, like what you said, Tyler. That's interesting to think about. I know there's like within the series itself, it seems to be kind of like a point where the tone definitely shifts. Like, you know, like you mentioned, Dave, the Cabin in the Woods, and then And as you get later on in the film series, New Line Cinema takes over, and then you get the Jason movies. Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, Freddy versus Jason. So there's definitely like between the two, the Friday 13th movies and the Jason movies, there's definitely like difference. Like, do you guys still appreciate the New Line Cinema movies?
Yeah, I mean, like, kind of as standalone things. Yeah, I like they have less to say. Like, Jason Takes Manhattan is a kind of a train wreck. Like, I mean, it's a mess, and it's the fact that it portrays New York as this particular thing automatically dates it. If I had to pick one or the other, like Jason X at least is intentionally winking and nodding, like it doesn't try to be more than a stupid, silly slasher movie in space. And like, that's where you get the kind of fun effects of like freezing somebody's head and smashing and all that kind of jazz. It intentionally has fun. So like, if you look at them as like pieces of candy and, that kind of stuff, yeah, they're entertaining. Yeah. I might watch it on a Sunday afternoon.
Oh yeah, definitely. I could pop in like Freddy versus Jason anytime. Or actually, I just rewatched Jason Goes to Hell a couple of days ago because I used to like think that I didn't like it, so I was like, hey, I'm going to watch it again, and I actually really like it because you have this different aspect to the movie. It's like you have this like creature feature type like body snatcher kind of element that's added into it, which I liked a lot. And so, but it's not really like, as a Friday the 13th movie, it's not really like it almost, it's like doesn't quite fit in with the Friday the 13th franchise, but it is Jason, but then you have this like body snatcher thing going on. So it's kind of an interesting mixture. It's like an oddity. It's like an oddity in the series. But another one that comes to mind that is very polarizing is Part 5, because in that one you have a killer. Well, you have a killer like in the first one, but in this one they're leading you to believe that Jason has come back. But then as the plot unfolds, you find out, no, it's not Jason. It's just a normal guy that's just snapped. And yeah. So, I don't know, Dave, how did that twist affect you? Did you like that twist in Part 5?
Okay, so I got a couple of points on that.
Yeah.
Going back to the way you said you thought Jason Goes to Hell was kind of like the weakest link of the series for you, I used to think the same thing. And I also gave it a rewatch. Not as recent as you, but it's still fresh in my head. And I did this because I had heard an interview on Chunky Larry's Creature Feature podcast where he got to sit down with Adam Marcus, who wrote the script. And he was talking about the reasons that they did the whole body jumping sequence. And that's because Adam Marcus grew up with Sean Cunningham, who directed the original. And he wanted the rights to direct a Friday the 13th movie finally. And he said, sure, but get rid of that damn mask. Because Sean Cunningham didn't like the whole Jason thing. He did the original. And so for him to be able to have the rights and the okay to do it, he's like, get rid of the mask. I don't want to have. So therefore we had Jason, but he was jumping bodies. And so we practically had that whole slasher sequence again. So knowing that, and then rewatching it, I was able to accept it more, like for a reason. And then I was like, okay, it wasn't bad. It's okay. And then it made me pick another movie as the weakest link, which hasn't come up yet. So I'm going to wait for someone to say it. But then as far as Part 5, I remember, I love this. I watched everything chronological, like I had to. It was like a disease. Like I could not watch them out of order. And I didn't have anybody ruin anything for me. So I don't even know if I caught it the first time. Like, because when you watch things at a certain age, they're for different reasons. So when I'm watching Friday the 13th 5, let's say child, it's the death sequences. How cool can they look? Then when I'm watching as a preteen, it's for other sequences, and they looked really good. And then going back and watching it, as an adult, you're watching it for all these reasons, but also you're taking the story in. And it makes a lot of sense because the fourth one's called The Final Chapter, and it has a very climatic ending. And so for them to come out with this fifth one, you had to do something different. And they completely did. And I used to not be okay with it, but now I kind of am because some people call it kind of the black sheep of the series or whatnot. But I think it's a movie that can stand on its own 2 feet. And it brings back Michael Nunez Jr. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, Tyler, how do you feel about the twist in part 5?
Oh man, like I mean, I think we're going to talk about them in depth, or at least favorite and favorites and all that. Spoiler alert: this is probably my least favorite. It like I don't like necessarily how it treats like it kind of throughout the entire movie sequence. It is problematic in how it treats some mental illness, but I hate like the double and the triple twist, and then at the very end there's an added one. It just felt like too many layers, like we're trying to do too much. But I will tell you, I felt like there were moments of Jason Goes to Hell that are really interesting, and it has been a long time since I've seen it, but I was thinking about it because I rewatched. Have you guys seen The Autopsy of Jane Doe?
No, not yet.
Oh, it's super good.
Okay.
But like 90 to 100% of it takes place like in a mortuary, and it's about trying to determine like how this body died and what this body is doing, despite the fact that it kind of is alive, kind of dead. And like there are so many moments of that film that spoke to Jason Goes to Hell. I was like, all right, this is pretty cool, and I can dig it, and it's a different take, but I think the setting is really creative and unique and interesting. So, yeah, I probably give it pretty high marks just for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check out The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I keep hearing other podcasts, other people talking about it. I just haven't sought it out to watch it yet.
Yeah, it's real good. It's real good.
I guess we can go ahead and talk about our favorites of the series. So I'll start off. My favorite, and I think this has a lot to do with nostalgia because it was the first one that I saw. So yeah, my favorite was part 3. I don't know. There's something about it that has a lot of charm. It is a biker gang. And I think, it's the first one where Jason gets his mask. You got Shelly, the annoying prankster, and you got the couple that's like a Cheech and Chong ripoff. You just got and then the whole like disco theme song, and I don't know what it is. It's cheesy, and it's probably the one I've seen the most. I can pop it in any day of the week and watch it. But it did have the whole like plot point where the final girl had a run-in with Jason in the past, but like somehow like that night when it happened, she had this run-in with Jason, and then the next morning she woke up in her bed and like it's like nothing had happened. So you're like, okay, what really happened there? And so that's kind of interesting. That's kind of a weird part of that movie. I'm not sure what to think about it. But Tyler, what's your favorite?
Yeah, I think I kind of deliberated over this for a while, but I think probably my favorite in the series that kind of encapsulates everything that I liked about the franchise is probably part 6. So Jason Lives. There are some really clever and kind of iconic deaths in that film. I appreciated the tongue in cheek. We talked some earlier about winking and nodding at the camera. Like, dude, there's so much of it in this movie that I would almost have difficulty classifying it purely as horror. I think it's almost horror comedy, and like that is my favorite subgenre. So I could watch that kind of stuff all day long. So it is entertaining, but still has like all of the old Jason stuff that you love. So yeah, man, part 6 would probably be mine.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, we talked with Tommy McLaughlin, the director for that. He had mentioned like, wanting to inject humor into it. I forgot that was one of the conditions on him directing it or something like that. I think was. Yeah. There's
this great scene where like this couple is like having sex in her RV, and like the RV's rocking back and forth, and she's like, no, you got to last longer until the end of the song, and he's like, well, how much is left in the song? And she's like, 10 minutes, and he's like rolling his eyes, and it still makes me laugh thinking about it. So yeah, man, it really does have some funny stuff in it.
Oh yeah, definitely. That is one of the better ones of the series. To be honest, it's one like when I first saw it, I think the humor put me off. Like when I saw it when I was a little bit younger, so I didn't like it for a while. But then I've rewatched it as I got older, and I really appreciate it for what it is, and the director tried to do something a little different. Dave, which one's your favorite?
So my favorite is part 2, for a reason we haven't named yet. When I dissect the movie I try to find alternate reasons to make it my favorite, but it always boils down to one thing. And out of all the movies, I feel like Part 2 has the best group of camp counselors. I love that entire cast of Friday the 13th Part 2. So watching them be introduced and getting to know their personalities and see the sparks between old romances and new romances, and just seeing the way they're adults, but they're still kind of adolescents in a way because they just want to party and have fun. And then there comes a time when they have to actually like split up. You know, like some people are going to stay out at the bar and some people are going to go back to the house. Some people are looking to get intimate. And even the beginning of the film, just the way it launches off, we have, you know, they're pulling pranks on each other where he gets his truck towed and he's having to chase down his truck because he thinks it's getting hauled away. And you find out it's just one of the other camp counselors around the corner laughing his ass off because he's like, hey, and summer starts here, you know, and that just sets up kind of like the humor we talked about, but also just knowing that you're going to have a lot of fun with the characters.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I love the whole campfire scene where they're telling the story about Jason, and that same scene gets copied in The Burning, which was good too. You know, I love that setting, you know, telling ghost stories around the campfire. So,
and you know,
yeah.
Friday the 13th Part 2 is the first time Jason uses the machete when he puts it into Mark's face, the guy in the wheelchair, which is extremely unfair. I mean, just saying, but that sequence, he's such a lovable character. And just when you know, feel like, man, he meets a good girl, this is awesome for him. And he's got nowhere to go. And then Jason just wham with that machete, and then down the stairs he rolls. And I remember thinking, like, that's one of those scenes, I wouldn't call it a jump scare, but it literally did come out of nowhere, and it left such an impact because you're just like, man, he'll kill anyone.
Yep. That's the kind of power of that series and him as a killer, man. Like, it doesn't matter black or white or what religion, or, you know, if you're disabled, you know, like, you know, you're all, you know, we're all victims of the machete at the end of the day. So, you know, it's the great equalizer. I mean, it's interesting.
The only thing I think he didn't kill children. Like in Part 6, where they show kids for the first time actually at the camp, there's a scene where, you know, he's portraying a boogeyman and he's in the cabin and the girl sits up. He didn't do anything. And I remember watching like, oh my gosh, no, what's about to happen, you know, with the same mentality of he'll kill anybody. But it was kind of nice to see, okay, he draws a line somewhere.
And probably a reference to, you know, his own victimhood, you know, like he returns back to that. Like, it seems like the most gruesome and graphic scenes are for the people doing the bullying, you know, the people that are perpetrating violence on other people. So, like, he is a revenge fantasy of every nerdy kid in high school like me, you know, so it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, you know, we talked about some of our favorite movies and, you know, there's definitely like some, I don't know, like, you know, just thinking about like our favorite movies and in the series, there's definitely like, just like there's like moments that stand out too. Like, the whole boxing scene in Jason Takes Manhattan, you know, the outhouse scene in Part 5 where the girlfriend is singing to Demon, you know, while he's on the toilet. Yeah, there's just like crazy scenes like that I think that are funny.
There are a number of scenes throughout the franchise where people use the bathroom, and there is like a ton of stuff. As I was kind of putting together some scholarly stuff to talk about, there's a ton of stuff like nobody wipes ever. So they're like, what kind of weird world do we exist in that like nobody is sanitary, you know? I you know, it made me go back and revisit those scenes, but it is funny, like all that kind of stuff. And like that latrine scene, I got super into right about the same time Friday the 13th came out. I got into, I think it's the Sleepaway Camp franchise. Have you guys seen those at all?
Yeah.
And there is a really awful, terrible porta potty death in that franchise too. So it was like, there's nothing worse than like biting it in a nasty, dirty camp bathroom. Like, that would suck bad.
Oh yeah, that's the worst. Yeah, I was trying to think of like growing up. Like, I think the first movie that I remember hearing about was Part 6. I think that came out when I was like in grade school, and that was like the big thing. But then, and I don't remember part 7 coming out. I don't remember anybody even talking about that. But then part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. I remember like that was like a big deal. That was like kind of like a pop culture big thing, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. Like even just the influence that Friday the 13th has had on pop culture in general. I mean, Jason's been on the Arsenio Hall show as a guest. You know, it's funny to see that. Yeah, so you know, we talked about some of our favorite moments, favorite movies. But of course, there's going to be ones that we don't like. And Tyler, you know, you've talked about part 5 being your least favorite. I mean, is there anything else you want to expand on that topic?
Oh, I mean, not really. Like I kind of hinted at before, horror movies are interesting for what they say and what they don't say, and it's lazy. I feel like, at least partially, kind of lazy storytelling to be like, oh, it's this guy who's son's death, crippled him and made him a bad guy. Like, we've recycled that trope before, like that's happened in the original. And then, at the very end of this idea, particularly a beloved character like Tommy, like that kid's been through enough. Like, I feel like, turning him into the monster at the end doesn't seem fair. Like I feel crappy about it, and even going back and looking at it again, like, I don't know, man. Like, I felt uneasy through the whole film, and not in a particularly scary way, in a like, kind of gross way. So, yeah.
Yeah, Tommy definitely gets redeemed in part 6, so, his character definitely gets to make that turnaround. Dave, what's your least favorite?
It's going to be, I believe, the same as yours. If I'm jumping the gun, stop me, but I'm going to say part 7. The reason that The New Blood is my least favorite is because it had the opposite effect of the other movies we talked about. I liked it as a kid, but then when I rewatched it, I was like, this Jason versus Carrie shit sucks. I couldn't get behind the main character having the telekinesis and making all this stuff happen. I wasn't feeling it. She was no Sissy Spacek, right? And I don't know. I love that it's the introduction of Kane Hodder in the Jason role. I try to give it the credit there, but that's kind of the only credit I can give it. I felt like even the camp counselors were lacking, and some of the death sequences were mixed between, okay, we have the body in the sleeping bag. I love that. But then so many cutaway scenes as well, where you just get here comes the rake. Oh, the rake's sticking out the other side and there's blood coming down. And I know I've went out on many occasions and said, if you can't show me a good death scene, then hint at it. So I'm glad it wasn't a CGI death scene. I know that wasn't too popular yet, but at the same time, it's Friday the 13th. You could do better than that. So for me, I feel like 7, they took a dip. Not saying it was redeemed, but maybe I'm saying that 6 might have been the last great Friday the 13th film.
And yeah, you're right. Part 7 is probably my least favorite of the series, and I think the movie just got censored really bad by the MPAA. Like, they had to like cut out a bunch of the gore, a bunch of the kills, and so that's why you got a lot of scenes that cut away from the kills when they happened to get it to pass the ratings board. And I think it was because more stuff get through like in the earlier movies, and they were trying to clamp down on it or something.
Well, see, Andy, the problem is they already set the standard. They set the bar really high in the beginning.
Yeah.
And we expected these great death scenes and these creative death scenes. I mean, with Tom Savini kind of kicking it off and showing us stuff that we seen throughout his entire career. Even one of my other favorite slashers, The Prowler. I mean, just amazing death sequences. Just to have them dialed back just feels like they're taken away from us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It always felt like I used to watch they would show really bad B horror movies late on Saturday night called Up All Night. It was hosted by Gilbert Gottfried for a while, but like they would never be able to show the movie in its like true form because it was USA, So you would get like these factory cut movies that didn't have the actual scene. It just had like the pool of blood or whatever. And it always just felt, I don't know, it didn't feel genuine or something. I don't know. It didn't feel authentic, I guess. So, yeah, man, I get it.
Yeah, so yeah, for me, part 7, that along with like the cutout, kills, and then The main girl just didn't really sell it for me. I wasn't really like, I don't know what it, like, she just didn't like, I didn't connect. I don't know what the word is. I didn't connect with her character. Anyway, and there was like the whole like subplot where her psychiatrist was trying to like, oh, that's right. He was trying to do research because he knew that she had these powers. And so he was trying to put her in stressful situations to make these powers come out. And so that whole like subplot I didn't really care for it. So anyway, yeah, part 7's mine. So we talked about our favorites, talked about our least favorites. In any series, there's going to be movies that are kind of like underrated or not really talked about, but we may really like them. I'll start off. I think for instance, I think in the age of remakes, everybody's like, oh, not another remake, but I think that the Friday the 13th remake was pretty good. I mean, I liked it a lot. Tyler, what'd you think about the Friday the 13th remake?
I thought it was okay. I wish they would have developed it a little differently. Like they given it its own voice. It just kind of felt like a fresher, newer version of the same stuff that we knew. So I would have liked, I don't know, maybe an introduction of a different mythos, even a different kind of plot development style, or subgenre or something. It was fine. It was certainly serviceable, and it fits right in the square kind of middle of where I would probably rank him, maybe towards the end, but it just wasn't anything special. And I was hoping, anytime we remake anything, I hope that it becomes as special as I think, the original is, and it didn't, it had a high threshold, and I don't think it necessarily met it, at least in my vision.
Dave, what do you think about the remake?
I'm totally okay with the remake. I get what Tyler's saying, and he's right. They totally, Platinum Dunes that thing. They said, hey, let's just take part 1, 2, and 3 and make it one movie. Then we can just kickstart these suckers out. And it's kind of a shame they didn't, because, I talk about the crumminess of part 7 and, the slope they fell through as the series continued. But, I'll take another one any day, because we haven't had a Friday the 13th film in like 8 or 9 years, and it's a shame. They shouldn't have set the budget so high on that remake and felt like they couldn't quadruple a profit. I know they did good, but the funny thing about this is so weird. The funny thing about the Friday the 13th remake for me is, how it starts out with like a 20-minute opener and then kind of gets into the film? I liked the cast in the 20-minute opener more than the cast that was used in the whole movie. Like, they weren't bad by any means, but I really wanted more with the people in the beginning. You had so much comedy in them. You could tell who was who was going to play what role. You had the token girl. You had everything there, the dweeb guy, the guy in charge, the pothead, everything together. Then you had the sleeping bag above the fire burning and Jason running and slashing. I mean, I was like, man, this is an amazing start. And then the rest of the movie, I felt like didn't catch up to it. Even though there's certain sequences that I was like, that was really cool, for sure. I just feel like it's okay.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah,
but I'll take another one in a heartbeat. I mean, let's get part 2 going.
Yeah, somebody like Blumhouse or somebody, we don't need to spend a great deal of money on it. Let's just get it out there.
Yeah, so you guys are okay with them making another Friday the 13th movie if they chose to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll sign that petition right now.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd be fine with that. I think there's some people that they just want these older horror franchises just to die and for us just to move on. I mean, I'm fine with them carrying on. I mean, it's what we grew up with. I mean, especially, our generation is what we grew up with. So, yeah,
I have been thinking about because our horror movies tend to reflect the political era in which we live, so that's why slasher films, particularly Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, are as powerful as they were these kind of conservative tools to argue against premarital sex and drug use and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's why we get less of them now, because that kind of culture war has been fought and waged and effectively won. At least if you look at the general attitudes of the public, they're way more liberal towards that stuff now, which is why you don't have that many slasher films, you know. But with this kind of new administration and the new kind of whatever, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a big push for something similar to this to come back out, because it you know, like, it seems like those political winds, you know, may be shifting one way or another.
Yeah, so who knows? We may, you know, we're getting a new Halloween this year. Maybe if that's successful, which it seems like they've got the right people behind it, you know, maybe that'll open the door for some other franchises to kind of get rebooted or continue. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. We heard you're underrated. We didn't get to hear Tyler. I mean, you talked about the one you love, the one you don't love. Which one do you feel is underrated?
Oh, I put like my unsung hero or whatever is probably the final chapter, which, you know, you may or may not like. I think I don't know. Like I talked about before, I just think it's really like for real. I think there is some legitimately good acting, you know, and like the rest of it can be campy and that kind of stuff. Like I think some people are really working hard in that movie. But I will tell you, the movie that I have probably watched the most, and it's silly and it's stupid, but it is freaking entertaining as all get out, is Freddy versus Jason. Like it's so silly and dumb, but like it itches that spot that I have for all of those things from the 80s, you know, and they're all here in this little thing, and it is entirely conscious of it being campy and silly and stupid, which makes me like it even more. So you can take your pick. I think they're both really fun movies to watch.
So when I think of the final chapter, two words come to mind, and the first word starts with a C, and it's not Corey Feldman, it's Crispin Glover.
Oh yeah,
right.
You have to love crazy Crispin Glover.
Yeah,
and his unfortunate outcome.
Oh yeah, the dance, man. I totally forgot about that.
That movie proves if you can't dance, you die.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'd forgotten. Yeah, Crispin Glover.
Whatever happened to that guy? I mean, I know he's done some other movies besides that, obviously, but like I haven't really seen him in anything here lately.
Well, while we're thinking about that, my recommendation, the one I feel gets no love is actually Jason X. And I push it because I feel like the problem the movie has is a typical horror fan looks at it and goes, Jason in space, no, that seems dumb. And then a sci-fi person doesn't really maybe want to watch horror. They want to watch something more sci-fi. So they're like, the Friday the 13th guy in space, that's dumb. And so you have both genres kind of looking at it over their shoulder like, I'm not sure I want to rent this. And it usually falls back on the shelf or out of your Netflix queue. And you need to kind of push it, because I'll tell you what, Jason X is awesome. It's not the top 3 best Jason movies, right? But you get a great kill count. You get awesome effects. You get the puns. The jokes are in there like crazy. It definitely shows love to the series in the beginning and the end. It gives you everything you want in a horror movie at least once. And I mean, we even get David Cronenberg plays a cameo in there. I'm like, how cool is that? That doesn't happen very often, you know? And there's Drowning Pool music. I mean, the movie is awesome. It has one of the best trailers on there. I mean, it was a well put together movie. And, you know, if anybody has a problem with Jason X, I say, have you not seen Leprechaun in Space? I'm just saying. There's nothing wrong with Jason X.
Well, I love the virtual reality scene, you know, where it's like, oh man, it's so self-aware and they're so ditzy and like I think they take their tops off at some point, but he just puts them in the sleeping bag and he just swings them like they're a soccer, you know, a tennis ball in a sock or something. Yeah, it is hilarious and I loved it. I laughed out loud, I think.
And anybody who happens to listen to this podcast that maybe has not seen Jason X and you're a sci-fi fan, give it a watch, because in Jason X, there's 2 characters that actually switch roles and go on a TV show, Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda. So you'll recognize two of the girls from Jason X later star in a 5-year TV show together. And it's really funny. And I'm telling you, Andy, I'm looking right at you because I know you've never seen Andromeda. But in Jason X, you have the main girl, right? The final girl. And then you also have the, what are we calling her? Cyborg or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I know.
And they both go on Andromeda. And the girl that's the final girl becomes the ship's avatar, and then the girl that's a cyborg becomes the main girl. Like, it's a flip, and they still get to work together. So it's kind of cool that, you know, you get to see the relationships work both ways.
Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation here on the Friday the 13th movie series. Tyler, tell the listeners once again, like, where can they stay up to date on everything going on with the Horror Podclass?
Sure. So we release the Horror Podclass every Friday. This Friday, we're talking about representative democracy and the Purge series. So you can check out that, get a little bit of education with the discussion of your horror movies. But we're all a product of the website Signal Horizon, which is a website devoted to pedagogy, education, science fiction, and horror. So if you like to think and talk about stuff, which, you know, you guys do, and I'm sure your listeners do too, just go on over to Signal Horizon and you'll be able to check it out. We're on Twitter and Facebook, and we'd absolutely love it if you dropped us a message and let us know what you wanted us to talk about next. So.
Yeah, I remember when Signal Horizon started, and you guys had some really awesome articles on there, and then you guys had the podcast. I was like, well, I got to check this out. So, yeah, I'm not disappointed, man. I really liked your H.P. Lovecraft episode, and you guys continually talk about, like, that kind of stuff, and that's kind of where I'm at. I love that. And then you make me think deeper about these subjects and you know, help me figure out why I like the things I like. So, yeah, it's really cool.
Well, awesome. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd urge everybody to go out there and check out the Horror Podclass. And as for us, Dave, how can people stay up to date with what's going on with you?
Snail mail. It's the only way. You got to get an envelope, piece of paper, stamp, and I'll get back to you. No. My only social media I'm out there on Twitter at Phantom Dark Dave. Sometimes you'll see it at Phantom Theories. I'm always attached to the Black Cat Shadow. And then, of course, I do the Days Pop Culture podcast, where if you love horror, check out Black Cat Shadow. If you love the people on Black Cat Shadow, but you wonder if they like anything besides horror, check out Days Pop Culture podcast. Andy and I do a pretty sweet run through on the X-Files.
Cool.
Oh, yeah, that was a blast. I really enjoyed that. And, yeah, you guys need to go check out his podcast, Dave's podcast, because it's a lot of fun. Anyway, so, yeah, for Black Cat Shadow, you can find us on Twitter. We're at Black Cat Podcast, and we're also on Facebook and Horror Amino as well. And you can go to www.blackcatshadow.com, where you can find all of our episodes on there, where you can download them and listen to them whenever you'd like. And you also find the link to our eBay movie store, where every purchase helps out the podcast. Also, since Dakota's not here, I'll speak for him. If you'd like to send him an email, his email is dakshadowbane@gmail.com. It's DAKSHADOWBANE@gmail.com. And if you'd like to email any of us at the Black Cat Shadow, our email is blackcatpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear any feedback or thoughts you guys have on the show. And so that'll do it for us. So remember, guys, to take a closer look at the world around you, and you may just find that it is stranger and more mysterious than you thought, especially in the Black Cat Shadow.